The air over Jerusalem was cold enough to see your breath. It was the hour before dawn, that particular gray that is not yet light, and the limestone of the city had gone the color of ash. Dew lay on everything. On the quarry stone outside the northwest wall, on the low branches of a garden planted in disturbed ground, on the sandals of a woman walking uphill in the dark with spices in her hands. Within the hour she would be holding him, and he would tell her to stop. She had made this walk 2 days earlier, in a terrible hurry, before the Sabbath closed over the city, with men beside her, and a body to carry, and no time to do anything properly. This time she was alone, and there was nothing left to hurry toward. That is the sentence this entire hour exists to explain. In most English Bibles for 400 years it read, "Touch me not." Why would he refuse her? She had stood at the cross when the others ran. She had watched where they laid him. She had come back first, in the dark, carrying spices for a corpse. And the very first instruction given by a resurrected man to a living human being appears to be, "Don't touch me." And before we take a single step further, hold on to this, because it is the detail that breaks every easy answer you have ever been given about that line. Later that same morning, on a road outside the same city, another group of women met him, and they took hold of his feet, and he said nothing about it at all. Same morning, same risen body. Grasped, and no correction. Hold on to that. We are going to need it. The question has a real answer. It is not the one most people have been given, and it is not one answer, but a chain of them. To follow it, you have to stand in that garden at that hour, and know what she knew and what she did not. Let us fix the ground under our feet first. The year is disputed. The two serious candidates are AD 30 and AD 33, and it turns on which years the 14th of Nisan fell on a Friday, a calculation resting on lunar visibility and on priestly decisions we cannot recover. 33 is reasonable shorthand. Nobody should tell you it is settled. The rest of the frame is firm. Tiberius rules in Rome, and Judea is governed by a prefect named Pontius Pilate, a man whose title we do not take on the word of the Gospels, because in 1961, an Italian expedition led by Antonio Frova, working in the theater at Caesarea Maritima, turned over a block of limestone reused as a building step and found his name and his office cut into its face. It is Passover week, and the city is packed far beyond its ordinary size. Into that crowded, occupied city 3 days earlier, a man had been executed by the Roman method reserved for slaves and rebels, a death designed to be public, slow, and humiliating enough to keep a province quiet. And now, in the cold before sunrise, a woman is walking out to his grave. Her name is Mary, and she is from Magdala. That last detail is not decoration. Magdala was a real fishing town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and since 2009, it has been under excavation. Work begun under Dina Avshalom Gorni for the Israel Antiquities Authority. What came out of the ground was a first-century synagogue, and inside it a carved limestone block now called the Magdala Stone. A named figure of the New Testament, and her hometown dug down to the layer she walked on. The floor is there. The text tells us 3 things about her, and we should be careful to know only those 3. Luke 8:2 records that 7 demons had gone out of her, and says nothing further. Any description beyond that is invention. Luke 8:3 places her among the women who funded Jesus and the 12 out of their own resources. She is not a peasant follower. She is a woman with means who spent them. And John 19:25 puts her at the cross, standing, while most of the men who had eaten with him 3 nights earlier were somewhere else. And one thing we should stop knowing about her. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. No verse anywhere says so. The identification comes from a sermon preached by Gregory the Great in 591, which merged 3 separate women into one. The unnamed sinful woman of Luke 7, Mary of Bethany, and Mary Magdalene. The Western Church carried that composite for 14 centuries. In 1969, the Roman calendar formally separated them again. The New Testament holds at least 4 distinct Marys. And it matters here because the woman clinging to him in that garden is not a rescued sinner, grateful to be forgiven. She is a patron, a witness, and a mourner. And what she is about to be asked to release is not her past. It is him. And one more thing about her before we walk out to that tomb. In the world she lived in, her word was worthless. Josephus states plainly in Antiquities 4:2-19 that the testimony of women was not to be admitted in court on account of what he calls the levity and boldness of their sex. A Jewish historian describing his own world's law. A century later, the pagan critic Celsus attacked the resurrection accounts on exactly that point, that the whole thing rested on the word of a hysterical woman. And we know it because Origen preserved the argument in order to answer it. Hold that next to what is coming. The first human being on earth to see a resurrected man, and the first person sent to announce it, is a witness her own world would not have let into a courtroom, a story invented to persuade that world would not have been built on her. That is an argument rather than a proof, but carry it with you into the garden. Now, the tomb. Almost everything you picture about that tomb comes from paintings, and one detail is worth correcting because the correction beats the myth. Amos Kloner, who surveyed the burial caves of the Jerusalem region and published his findings in Biblical Archaeology Review in 1999, examined more than 900 tombs of the Second Temple period. Of those 900, only 4 are known to have used a round, disc-shaped rolling stone. 4, the overwhelming majority, were sealed with a squared block, shaped like a cork, and plugged into the entrance. All 4 belonged to tombs of the very rich, which is exactly why the round stone stays possible here, since Matthew 27:57-60 tells us this tomb belonged to Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man. Possible then, but rare. Here is the detail that matters more, and it is one of those places where text and ground agree so quietly you could miss it. The entrances to these tombs were low, often under a meter. To look inside one, you did not walk in. You bent double, or you knelt. And the Greek verb John uses, twice, for what the disciple did at the entrance and for what Mary did afterward, is parakupto, to stoop down and peer in. A writer, inventing this scene from another country decades later, would have his characters walk into the tomb. John has them fold themselves in half at a hole in a rock face. The vocabulary fits the architecture of the ground. Recent excavation beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, an abandoned quarry that lay outside the 1st century wall, has reported preliminary traces of cultivated olive and grapevine in the soil. That work is directed by Francesca Romana Stasola of Sapienza University in Rome, and preliminary is the right word. But John 19:41 says that in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. So, a quarry face outside the wall, pale limestone, which cuts soft, hardens in the air, and turns gold when the sun comes up over the Mount of Olives. A garden in the broken ground, a low doorway. Inside, a bench cut into the rock, and cold air smelling of stone dust, and of 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes, the quantity John 19:39 says Nicodemus brought. A royal quantity, the amount you use when you cannot say what you mean. Mary arrives while it is still dark. That is John 21. Mark 16:2 says the sun had risen. The Gospels frame the same hours differently, and I am not going to force them onto one stopwatch. Darkness carries meaning all through John, and he uses it here. The stone has been taken away, and her first thought is not resurrection. Most retellings skip this, and it is essential. She runs to Peter and the other disciple and says, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." That is John 22. Her interpretation is grave robbery, not faith-failing, plain sense. An opened tomb meant thieves, and the theft of a body was a specific grief, because it meant losing even the place where the person was. The two men run. The younger arrives first and stoops and looks in but does not enter. Peter goes past him and goes in. They see the linen cloths lying there, and the cloth that had been on his head folded up by itself. And then, in one of the strangest sentences in the New Testament, they go home. They go home, and that departure is what makes everything that follows possible, because it leaves her alone. Everyone else went home. She stayed. Let me stop the story right there for a moment, because that is a place a great many people are standing at this exact minute, and it deserves better than being narrated past. Is there something you are still standing beside? Not a sin, not a mistake, but something good, something you loved, a season or a person or a version of your faith that used to work, that everyone else seems to have walked away from already? And do you suspect you are the one being asked to open your hands and let it be finished? Tell me in the comments, not the abstract version, the real one. I read them, and this passage tends to find people at exactly that moment. Because of everyone who could have been standing in that garden, she is the one who was. She stays outside the tomb, weeping. Then she stoops, that verb again, and looks in. Two figures in white are sitting where the body had been, one at the head and one at the feet. Some readers, ancient and modern, have heard in that arrangement an echo of the two cherubim who faced each other across the mercy seat of the ark in Exodus 25:18-22. That is an interpretation rather than a statement of the text, but it is an old one, and not a foolish one, the place of atonement, empty, with a messenger at either end. They ask why she is weeping. She gives the same answer she gave Potter. They have taken him, and I do not know where they have put him. Then she turns around, and there is a man standing there, and she does not know him. This non-recognition is not unique to her, which is worth saying, because it is often used to imply she was hysterical or blinded by tears. On the road to Emmaus that same day, in Luke 24:16, two disciples walk with him for hours without recognizing him. In John 21:4, on the shore of the lake, the disciples do not know him either. 3 accounts, 3 sets of witnesses, the same strange failure. Whatever the risen body was, people who had known him well did not identify it by sight. She supposes he is the gardener, and she says, and there is more courage in this line than in almost anything else, she says. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." A woman alone, at dawn, offering to carry a corpse. He says one word, her name, and she knows him instantly, not by his face, by his voice, which is exactly what he had promised back in John 10:3-4, where the shepherd calls his own sheep by name, and they know his voice and follow him. She answers in Aramaic, Rabboni. John, writing for readers who need it, translates it as teacher. It is a heightened form, warmer and more reverent than the plain rabbi, and elsewhere in the Gospels it appears on the lips of only one other person, the blind man Bartimaeus in Mark 10:51, who used it at the moment he asked to see, and she takes hold of him. The text does not say that in so many words. It does not have to, because of what he says next, and because of the tense he says it in. In the Greek, the words are mimu haptu. In the King James Version, and therefore in the imagination of the entire English-speaking world for 4 centuries, touch me not. That translation follows the Latin of the Vulgate, Noli me tangere, and that Latin phrase became the title of one of the most painted scenes in the history of Western art. Giotto painted it. Fra Angelico painted it on a monastery wall in Florence. Titian painted it. Correggio painted it. In nearly all of them, she reaches, and he leans away, and his hand is raised between them. 1,000 years of painting taught us that he pulled back. The Greek does not say he pulled back. The verb haptomai does not mean to brush against. It means to take hold of, to fasten onto, to grasp and keep hold. And it is in the present imperative with the negative, a form that addresses an action already underway. It is not a rule being issued about future contact. It is an instruction about something happening at that moment, which is why the English Standard Version and most modern translations render it, "Do not cling to me." She is already holding him. He is not refusing the embrace. He is ending it. And here is why we cannot stop at the translation, however satisfying the correction feels. Because the title of this video asks why, and the King James phrased it awkwardly, is not a why. It tells us what he did not say. It does not tell us what he meant. And there is a problem in the text that the translation fix does not touch at all. Now remember the thing I asked you to hold on to? Matthew 28:9. The same morning, the same city, a road outside the walls. The women meet him, and they take hold of his feet, and they worship him. The verb Matthew uses is stronger than the one in the garden. They seized, they gripped, they did not let go, and he does not correct them. He says, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers." That is the verse that ruins every simple explanation of John 20:17, and it is the reason the translation fix cannot be the end of this, and it gets harder. In Luke 24:39, in a room in Jerusalem, he actively invites it. "Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." And in John 20:27, 8 days later, he tells Thomas to put his finger into the wounds. And in John's Gospel, no ascension has been narrated in between. So the explanation that he could not be touched because he had not yet ascended runs directly into Thomas, and into Matthew, and into Luke. Any treatment of this passage that does not put those 3 verses on the table is not being straight with you. And notice that those same 3 verses are what makes the translation reading secure. Grammarians such as Daniel Wallace rightly warn against treating the negative present imperative as an iron law that always means stop what you are doing. Fine. We are not resting on one rule in a grammar book. We are resting on a morning in which the risen body of Jesus is seized twice more before the sun goes down, without a word of complaint. The reason he gave is right there in the sentence, and we tend to read past it. "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." For, because. He supplies his own reason, and then he supplies a command. Everything worth saying about this verse is an attempt to understand what that reason means. So what does it mean? The answer is in this gospel, and Jesus had already given it, out loud, weeks earlier, in a room where nobody understood him yet. In John 16:7, he said, "It is to your advantage that I go away, for if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you." Read that again with a woman's arms around him in a garden. He had already told them that his physical presence, the thing they most wanted to keep, was the very thing standing between them and what was coming next. Not because presence is bad, because the mode of it was about to change, and the new mode could not arrive while the old one was still being held. He had gone further. In John 16:22, in the same conversation, he described this exact morning before it happened. "A little while, and you will not see me, and again a little while, and you will see me. You will weep and lament while the world rejoices. Your sorrow will turn into joy." He told them there would be weeping, and then seeing, and then joy. And here is a woman weeping at a tomb who is about to see him. And John gives us the mechanism plainly in John 7:39, in an aside to the reader. The Spirit had not yet been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. In this gospel, the ascent to the Father is not one measurable moment of leaving the ground. It is the completion of what John calls the hour, the cross, the rising, the return to the Father, and the giving of the Spirit, held together as a single movement. Scholars such as Raymond Brown and Francis Maloney have argued this reading at length, and it is the one that makes the whole chapter cohere, which is what finally dissolves the Thomas problem. And the answer is 5 verses away from the question, because that same evening, in John 20:22, he stands among them in a locked room and breathes on them and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit. In the morning, I have not yet ascended. That evening the Spirit given." 8 days later, "Thomas, put your finger here." The thing that had not yet happened at dawn had happened by nightfall. The instruction to Mary was not a permanent rule about the risen body. It was a statement about a specific hour that was still in motion, an hour that closed before the sun went down on that same day. And that is the answer. He was not refusing her. He was telling her that the form of relationship she was reaching for, walking beside a teacher on the roads of Galilee, close enough to touch, which is the only form she had ever had, was over. And that the reason it was over was that something closer was arriving. Not a body she could hold for a few more hours before losing again, a presence she could not lose. And that is also why the other explanation, the one you will meet in every comment section on this passage, does not work. It runs like this. Jesus was acting as high priest, carrying his own blood into the heavenly sanctuary as Leviticus 16 prescribes, and a priest in that state could not be touched until the offering had been presented. It draws on real texts. Hebrews 9:11-12 and 9-24 do describe him entering the true holy place, but it does not hold for 3 reasons. Hebrews develops that argument at length and never once applies it here, and Hebrews is the book that would have. John never mentions ritual purity anywhere in this chapter, and John is not subtle when he wants you to see a temple parallel. And most decisively, the women held his feet that same morning, and nothing happened. No interrupted offering, no ritual consequence, no rebuke. Whatever John 20:17 is, it is not a purity regulation. And notice that the sentence does not end where we have been stopping it. It does not end with, "Do not cling." It ends with, "Go to my brothers." Grammatically, that command is the main business of the verse. The prohibition exists to make room for the sending. He was not taking something from her. He was putting something in her hands, and her hands were full. And of all the words available to him, he chose that one, "My brothers." Turn back to Psalm 22. The psalm that opens with the words he cried from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The psalm with pierced hands and divided garments and casting lots. Read past the suffering to verse 22, where the psalm turns. I will tell of your name to my brothers. The first sentence he speaks as a risen man contains that word. And Hebrews 2 and Surenio Ledavend Fororis 12 quotes that very verse of that very psalm and says of him, he is not ashamed to call them brothers. In John 15:15, on the last night, he had told them he no longer called them servants, but friends. On the morning of the resurrection, they are brothers, and his Father is their Father, and his God is their God. Every one of them had run. Peter had denied him 3 times in a courtyard, and the message he sends through her upgrades their standing. There is one more layer, and it belongs to the same festival week. Leviticus 23:10-11 commands that when the harvest is reaped, the first sheaf be brought to the priest and lifted before the Lord on the day after the Sabbath. The barley was ripening around Jerusalem that spring. Paul makes the connection himself in 1 Corinthians 15:20. Christ has been raised, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. I will not pretend the ritual day can be pinned down. Pharisees and Sadducees disagreed about which Sabbath the command meant, and that year's calendar cannot be recovered. The typology rests on Paul's own use of it, not on a reconstructed liturgy. But it is Paul's, and it is early, and there is the garden. John alone tells us there was a garden at the place of crucifixion. John alone tells us she mistook him for the gardener. In the first garden there was a man given the ground to keep, and a woman, and everything was lost. In this garden there is a woman at dawn, and a man she takes for the keeper of the ground, and everything is given back. Whether John intended that echo cannot be proven from the text. Christian writers heard it very early, and once you have heard it, you do not stop hearing it. Nor should we leave out the strangest echo of all. In Song of Songs 3:1-4, a woman searches for the one she loves by night and doesn't find him, and asks the watchman where he is, and then says, I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go. A woman, in darkness, searching, questioning bystanders, and then holding and refusing to release. Some specialists in John's Gospel, Anne Roberts Windsor among them, have argued that chapter 20 deliberately echoes that passage. If they are right, then the clinging in that garden is not an error being corrected. It is a love song being quoted back to the woman living inside it. She let go, or at least she went. John never tells us how the holding ended. The text simply moves, and it is the most human silence in the chapter. She went to the disciples and announced 4 words. I have seen the Lord. They did not believe her. Luke 24:11 says the women's words seemed to the apostles an idle tale. And when Paul records the earliest resurrection creed in 1 Corinthians 15:5-8, a formula older than any gospel, the list of witnesses does not include the women at all. That is uncomfortable, and I am not going to tidy it away. But all 4 men who told this story at length put her first anyway, in a world where, as we have already seen, her word would not have been heard in a courtroom at all. The church later gave her a title for it, Apostola Apostolorum, the apostle to the apostles. That phrase is ecclesiastical tradition rather than first-century record, and I label it as such. But it names something the text itself does. The first person commissioned to announce the resurrection was a woman whose testimony would not have been accepted in a courtroom. As for the rest of her life, the New Testament closes and says nothing. An Eastern tradition attested by Modestus of Jerusalem places her final years at Ephesus, near the Apostle John. The Provençal legends of a boat to Gaul are medieval. There is no reliable record. She walks out of the gospel with 4 words in her mouth. But this hour does not belong only to the year 33, because what happened to her in that garden happens, in some form, to nearly everyone who has ever loved anything. She was holding the man she had watched die. Every instinct in her was correct. Her grief was correct. Her devotion was correct. Her arms around him were the only honest response a human being could have had. And she was told that holding was now the wrong verb. Not let me go. Not I am leaving you. Do not cling. And then immediately go. The release wasn't into emptiness. It was into a commission. She lost the version of him she could touch, and received a version of him she could never be separated from. And the trade did not feel like a gift at the time. It felt like being asked to open her hands at the worst possible moment. You have stood there. Maybe you are standing there now. A season that worked. A church that formed you. A person. A body that used to do what you asked. A way of praying that used to feel like something and now feels like talking to a wall. And the question that terrifies you is not whether you can survive losing it. You have survived things. The question is whether letting go means losing him twice. It did not for her. What she was asked to release was not the relationship. It was the shape of it. And on the far side of that release, she was not further from him. She was the first person on earth to be sent by him. So let me leave you with the question that Garden asks, and let me ask it directly, because it is not an abstract one. What are you still holding at the mouth of a tomb, because opening your hands feels like losing him a second time? Sit with that. And if someone came into your mind while you were listening, someone in that garden right now, holding on to something that has already ended and terrified of what happens if they stop, send this to them today. People do not stay in that garden forever. They either let go or they harden. And a word arriving at the right hour has changed the direction of a life more than once. If reconstructions like this one are what you want more of, the ground, the stones, the Greek, the honest uncertainties left standing where they belong, stay with us. There is a great deal of the first century still to walk through, 1 hour at a time. And tell me below, when you first heard, "Touch me not," what did you think it meant? Before today, what did you believe was happening in that garden? I want to know what you carried into it, and what you are carrying out.